how did you start DJing? Like, if we take it back to, I think, DJ Italian Ice. We'll take it back.
Well, where is DJ Italian Ice?
Yo, he ain't here.
People still ask about me. Still ask me about him. I haven't seen him in a long time. Nor have I spoke about him.
Talk about that. Like, what was up with Richard Fraioli and DJ Italian Ice? How did you have two?
How it all started was my father. He was a DJ forever. I saw him doing gigs, side gigs, the nightclubs. I grew up with music, whether I wanted to hear it or not, in the house from him. My mother's a big music junkie as well, so listening to music in the car. And thankfully, it was all 60s, 70s, 80s, Motown, disco, funk, soul, the good stuff. the good stuff, yeah. So, I developed an ear for that. Growing up again, watching my father DJ and seeing how he can control the crowd through music. He would have me help him with a lot of his gigs. And or help, aka he was putting me to work at a very young age. As I get older, I realize that, and I just took a liking to it. And I would help him with school dances, weddings, private events. He was actually doing a little nightclub too in Boston and in surrounding areas as well. And that crazy mofo would take me with him. So I got introduced to the scene at a very, very young age. That's why, when people ask me how long have you been doing it, and I could comfortably say, professionally making a living, 15, 20 years, but I've been doing this I've been around it for about 30 years. You could say my whole life, I guess, but when I actually knew what was going on and grew up a little bit to realize what was going on, which was around 8 years old. That's how I got into it. He took me to Miami for my first time in 2003. Actually, I graduated 8th grade, and I still have to ask my parents who approved this, because my 8th grade graduation gift, my father used to go to Miami every single year by himself. But when I graduated 8th grade, my gift was a ticket to Florida with his crazy best friend. I've been saying this forever the last year. I still need to ask my mother and father who approved that. Was it daddy saying Richard's going to Florida? Or did they say, yeah, maybe he'll like Florida? I hadn't been out of the state or like that far out of the state in my life. So I went to Florida around the year 2000, 2001. And then my father brought me to my first winter music conference in Miami in 2003. And that whole experience and that trip is what solidified me wanting to actually make a living and do this for the rest of my life. I went to my first nightclub. I went to my first Ultra Music Festival. I saw just I've always been a night guy too. I was always the last one to go to sleep and sleepovers when we were little kids. And I was like, this is what I want to do. And this is where I want to be and what I want to be around forever. So, and fast forward, years and years go by. Oh, I'm going to move to Florida. I'm going to move to Florida. That was always the plan.
That's what we all said, right? That's what we all said.
And how it actually happened was 6 years ago. I'm at the dinner table with my mother, and I said, "Ma, I really think I'm going to do this move." And my mother's a saint. She doesn't yell. She doesn't get angry. She gets aggravated, but she doesn't get angry or anything. So she didn't slam on the table, but she was like, she just did a little bump, and she's like, "Richard, you've been saying this for years. Do you want to do it now while you're young, or do you want to be old and regret that you never did it?" That was it. A month later, packed the car up and drove down to Florida, and now I'm here.
So now you're here, right? Mm-hmm. In Massachusetts, you would DJ two styles of music.
Right. I've always loved house music.
Right.
So at the time, I had an alias because Richard Fraioli was the actual underground music, house, tech, Afro. When Afro was real Afro, but Afro house. So in Boston, I'm sure people like to label you, or they used to back in the day. You had to distinguish your style in order to become known. Like, people would come see that specific style. Right. So I would always do Richard Fraioli versus somebody else. I had an alter ego. When people would see that on a flyer versus, they knew they were getting an open format night. They were getting the whole shebang. But if it was just a single name, Richard Fraioli, they knew they were getting straight up house music. So that's and we did that because it's different now. But in Boston or New England, or just in that the way the music industry was back then, that's how you distinguished. That's how you didn't get labeled if you were trying to do everything all at once. And I love music. I mean, I always say, house music will own my heart, but all music owns my soul, and that's pretty much it.
Yeah,
that's how it happened.
And for those of you that don't know, so a lot of you on Instagram and YouTube, I've always used to talk about how I used to DJ back in New England, back in Boston, and me and Richard here, we would run different nights, even parallel to each other, you know. Sometimes even DJing on the same night, like together, like when we DJ'd with Louis DeVito for those big events, right? I think you hooked me up with that one. I think you hooked me up
my
with that
father
one.
did.
Yeah, somebody put it in Louis DeVito's ear, and all of a sudden,
no, your name was. I mean, you were running the show back then. I mean, we were all very popular and making moves, and people wanted to see us.
Yep.
So,
And I tell my wife all the time, I said, never in my life would I think that there's two Richies that were the most popular DJs in a certain area. And, you know, when you went to see Richard Fraioli, you knew what you were getting. And when you went to see Richie play, you knew what you were getting, right? So our styles were similar but different, right? So like they could go see Richard Fraioli and understand that they're going to get a different like mix of, at least from what I understand, correct me if I'm wrong, but you'd get a mix of like house music, you know, vocal and hard, and then you throw in an occasional like mashup in there or two mashups. And me, I was
always
just
loved doing that.
Yeah, and I've always been the type like, nah, fuck that, yo. I'm banging it out. Like, you know, 11 o'clock, I'm like bang, 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 some Scott Project, Derb. Like
you stayed true to it.
I was just like, man, I'm playing hard shit. I don't even care. And then I kind of softened up a little bit, you know, like Stereo Love came out and I would like drop that in the beginning, and I was just like, oh, I want 12:30 to hit, 1 o'clock to hit, so I can start playing, you know, the friggin' old school, the bangers at 145 BPM. You know what I mean?